Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley. I have a very special guest with me on today. I have Nick Bonfiglio. He's currently the CEO of Syncari, which basically got Series A funding in May of last year for $17 million. He was the former CTO at LucasFilm during Star Wars. He's also the EVP of Global Product for Marketo, which took them from 2.5 million to 300 million in ARR and eventually sold to a PE firm. Nick, welcome, man. Happy to have you on the show.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me, and happy post-New Year.
Yeah. Happy post-New Year, man. And I gave Nick a little jab about this, but he's got the Steve Jobs look going with the black shirt, looking sharp, man.
I always wear black. Most introverts do.
I like it, man. So let's talk through. Let's give everybody just kind of a quick revenue rundown to start the episode, so they have a little context on where you're at. So where are you guys at in your revenue journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, 2.5 years ago we were slides, and in about that time we became a product and Series A viable in May of last year, and we're well north of that at this point and working towards our Series B.
That's awesome. All right, what about your go-to-market strategy? What's your lead go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I mean, when we started the company, Ryan, we really were trying to figure out how to carve out a piece, because what we're building can be so broad and horizontal that it's just you can't go to market that way. And so we carved off a slice of what we think was relevant about what we were building, which we called customer data at the time. And so we started thinking about how do we, the biggest problems in companies with data right now tends to be around customers and revenue and things like that. And so everything that we connect to and everything that we unify and bring to life for people, it revolves around customer data. When you think about who is responsible for customer data in a lot of businesses, now primarily because us being a no-code platform, we're really trying to move people away from heavy IT tools and more into business leading and business owned tools. And so Syncari is definitely a no-code platform, and what we discovered is that there was this emergence of revenue operations that care deeply about the state of their data inside of the organization in order to get to better outcomes. And so honestly, our ICP continues for this year, last year and this year, to be what we call RevOps, which loosely can include sales operations, marketing operations, success operations, finance operations, biz ops, those sorts of folks that revolve around the revenue operations of data.
Yeah, and that's so critical. And I've seen just an explosion in interest in RevOps alone over the past year and a half. So I'm excited about what you guys are doing and where you're going, and there's a massive need for it. How big is your team, Nick?
I mean, it's now 35. We'll be 50 by the end of this year, but it's still, it's still small. But every day it gets bigger, and we're doing well considering how hard it is to recruit in this market, and the fact that we tend to look for, as everyone else does, for super stellar A players. It's one thing to fill a position; it's one thing to make that position be filled with something that's meaningful or someone that is meaningful to move the needle forward, and that's kind of how we think about that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that makes sense. And I know you're funded right now. We talked about that. You're in the kind of the Series A stage. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. So that's a great background context about kind of where you guys are at, what you're doing. So what's your journey to get here? I mentioned in the intro, you were the CTO for Lucasfilms for a while. That's amazing. And then, Marketo as well. So can you just give your professional journey and how you got to this point?
I mean, look, I've been Silicon Valley SaaS oriented for my entire career, which is roughly going on 30 plus years. And it's funny you mentioned the Lucasfilm one, because it's probably the least relevant to what I mostly did in my career. It's just, I went off to do that, and it was really more of a chief tech role. It wasn't the CTO role per se at Lucasfilm, but you can think of it that way. And I discovered that, hey, I like software and startups more than I like, the film industry or those kinds of things. So, it was a great experience. But look, I've done SaaS companies, Collabnet, Marketo, Portera, a few others early on before it was even called SaaS, back in the when people were trying to call it ASP and other things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, Marketo was probably the biggest success as well as growth for me, in that going from 2.5 million to 300 million, you don't get that opportunity a lot, and you learn so much. And we happen to have a CEO at Marketo who's tough, right? But the reality is he's super brilliant too, and the way he approached growing his business. I think Marketo started a lot of other companies, and a lot of them have been successful because the learnings that you got there in cutting your teeth in that size of a growth. And again, I credit Phil Fernandez, who was the CEO there, for a lot of what we did. And that allowed me to start a company. Marketo went public, was purchased by a private equity firm called Vista. And around that time, I decided I want to go back to doing a startup, and started a company called Aptrinsic. That company was pioneering product-led go-to-market before anyone knew what product-led go-to-market was, and wrote a book on it with my co-founder there, and and Mick Pono, who was also instrumental in that. And what we discovered is that market grows at a certain pace, and it made more sense for it to be aligned with people that are already selling to SaaS companies. And we sold that to Nick Mehta at Gainsight in 2016, I believe, or sorry, 18. And then I was sort of done, retired, moved to Scottsdale, to our vacation home in Scottsdale, relocated here permanently about a year later, and got into horsemanship, and we have 4 horses, and was doing all of that. I'm not a golfer or anything like that. I mean, you would never catch me doing those things, but yeah, no, I mean, look, that career through Marketo, through Aptrinsic, and then one morning, I sort of woke up and had lunch with somebody that I know, and they were talking about the state of data in their business, and I was like, wait, how could this still be a problem in 2019? This has been solved, right? There's iPaaS, there's RPA, there's all these things. And, when I started deep diving into the state of the art of these 15-year-old platforms, they're still approaching it from a connection perspective, Ryan. And so what we saw was that, look, there's a data element to this, that being data led inside of these integrations, that moves you from integrations to interoperability. Fast forward, called my good friend, and he was chief architect at Marketo, and my co-founder here, CTO as well, Nilesh Shastri, and said, hey, I got this idea. I wrote, here's what I'm thinking. Here's kind of the architecture I'm thinking. What do you think? And 30 days later, I didn't hear from him for 30 days. And 30 days later, he calls. He goes, Nick, I've been researching this for 30 days. And he goes, no one is doing what you want to do in this. And I said, yeah, but can we build it? And he goes, I think so. And so, because it's a really, really super hard problem to solve. And the ability to build stateful connections to SaaS APIs and make them transactional, and sort of moving people from integration, mindset to interoperability mindset across their tech stack is what we really are doing here. And I put some slides together. I tried to get Nilesh to be the CEO of the company, and he said, I'm not doing it without you. And fast forward, here I am.
Wow. All right. So there's a lot to unpack there, man. Awesome story. Awesome journey. I mean, and the horse thing, I didn't know that about you. I know we chatted a couple times before. Like, my wife just started taking horseback riding lessons last year, and she's learning to do it. It was a big moment yesterday because she learned how to canter on the horse for the first time. So, anyways, that's really, really cool. I love horses. They're beautiful animals, and I'm a big animal nut myself. But not get off topic on that. But so here, I'm gonna go back in your journey a little bit. We're gonna hit, because like I said, there's a lot of really cool things you did. I'd love to dig into. So what was it like working for George Lucas?
I mean, you get to meet him a few times, but I would say that working at Lucasfilm is for a certain type of individual, is the way I would say it. And I had a good time, and we did a lot there. And but I would just say it wasn't for me, is the way I would answer that. So it was great. I mean, you go to the ranch, and it's like you get to meet some stars. He has a beautiful facility. Well, he had until he sold it to Disney, but a beautiful facility at the ranch, and had restaurants in there, and so from that perspective, it was always super great. But it's also, I mean, I guess the best way to say it is the tech folks aren't really the stars of the show, right? If that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. Whereas a SaaS startup, I imagine you guys are
Yeah,
the star
yeah,
of
the
the
tech
show,
guys are the
right?
star of the show.
So
Right?
now that I get that. I mean, that totally makes sense. So what about, let's fast forward a little bit. So like Marketo, from 2 million to 300 million plus.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there's a lot of amazing people that came out of there to start different companies. And you were head of product there for that. Was it the entire run that you were head of product for
No,
that?
actually, it was just the last 4 years. I was the head of global product, which included operations, engineering, product management, support, and a few other things. But the first 3 years at Marketo, I was there to rebuild their SaaS business. Essentially, they didn't know how to build and manage and operate an at-scale SaaS infrastructure, and so my team and I, with some great people, got that under control. And then fast forward, Phil asked me to take over the entire product org, and that's how I got there.
So let me ask you this, because like obviously there's success in the patterns that happen, and like you had the job at Lucasfilm, right? And then you kind of went in, and I'm sure you had a lot of other jobs in between, right? But Marketo, you were there from that run of 2.5 million to 300 million plus, and then you sold a company, and then you started another company. So let's talk about Marketo. Like, what do you need to believe to be a part of a rocket ship that grows from 2 million to 300 million, and then get promoted along the way to be one of the top leaders in the company? Like, what do you have to believe, and like what kind of identity do you have to step into to like just evolve?
I've never had that question, right? It's an interesting question. To be at a company like Marketo when we were going through that growth is not for the faint of heart. So I would say it takes insane tenacity and discipline to your North Star, your own personal North Star. I mean, obviously the company has a North Star, but your own personal North Star. And it, for me, became I can do this. Like, literally, Marketo would make you feel, and a lot of people would probably relate to this that went through this, that I feel like a failure. And the reason that happens is because it was going so fast, and Phil's insanely detail oriented and can operate in almost any team. He challenges you to step up or step out, is the best way to think of it. And a few people stepped up, and a lot of people stepped out during that time. And I would just say tenacity and just your sheer will of wanting to do it. We were also, and as Syncari is and today, insanely customer focused. I would say that it went beyond like just saying the words. Everything that we do at Syncari and everything we did at Marketo revolved around the success of the customer, including your engineer. Like, I'll give you an example. If a customer is having an issue with a product or needs a feature to be successful, and that impacts your roadmap, we do that here at Syncari. We did it at Marketo all day long, because you have to innovate, but you also have to make the customer successful in the process. Now, we did a couple things wrong in Marketo at the end there with success, but I don't want to get into those that we fixed here, I think. But yeah, I mean, this insane focus on the customer success has to permeate every SaaS company. Who cares if you got the best tech? If your customers aren't happy or aren't using it, it's not stabilizing at a rate that makes you valuable to them, you're not going to succeed, right?
Well, what and I think that's awesome that you have that approach, and then you took that with you to Syncari. But let me ask you this: so what's the number one thing you need to focus on to deliver customer success when you're going through that process with a SaaS product?
Yeah, I mean, at Syncari, I made sure that support and success are only about the health and success of the customer. There's nobody in success that tries to talk about renewals or any kind of upsell or cross sell or anything like that. And I think confusing your success with a renewals team is probably the thing that can turn off customers pretty quickly. And so our head of success, Donna, she and her team, their whole job is just to make the customer successful. And it's our sales organization that is going to continue to hold the renewals. And eventually they'll be, right now it's split between the current AEs, but at some point there'll be a dedicated renewals person, but still in sales, because you just don't want to confuse your customer. Like when Donna calls them, that they're calling for a renewal or an upsell, right?
Right.
And that they're calling to help them out with their problems.
Okay. That's good. And I've seen both sides of the fence on that kind of debate. It's like, do you mix it? Do you not mix it? I've never seen an organization that I've worked with that's been only customer success. So I think that's pretty cool that you've done it. They've always had some kind of element of renewal so how do you measure customer success then? Like, what are your leading and lagging indicators that you use to like measure like how successful your customers are being?
It's the same thing. I mean, it's a company. The company owns those metrics more than one person or one team, right? You have churn, you've got NDR, you've got growth, upsell, etc. And the growth and NDR get tracked in sales, and the churns get tracked in success. The churns mostly times happen when it's not an acquisition or a company going out of business because you did not help that customer, right? And so I kind of like put churns on Donna, but I put the growth NDR upsell numbers in on the sales side, if that makes sense. And I could be making a mistake, but for this size that we're at right now, I think it's the right way to build a company.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, you'll figure it out. Obviously, you'll figure it out. Okay, so
first world problem to figure that out.
Yeah, you'll figure it out, man. You're doing pretty good. So I got a lot of confidence in you. So let's fast forward. Then Marketo, you left that. You did the Apptrinsic thing. How big was Apptrinsic when you sold it?
In as far as employees or revenue or what?
Just revenue, revenue.
We never announced that, but
you never announced it. Okay.
No, but it was a Series A company. Just leave it at that.
You're like I love it. Yeah, most companies are like, I sold for this much, I did this. So it's cool, man. You're a little stealthy, which is respectable on that. But
I mean, I don't own the company anymore. Nick does, and I wouldn't want to disrespect his wishes.
Yeah. Well, then let's just talk in terms of how did you get to the point where you're like, so you went on that rocket ship, you persevered, you found a way, had great leadership that you were a part of, became one of the top members of the leadership team. Then, how long did it take you on that journey to sell the Gainsight, from when you started to when you sold?
There's a long history there, but it was, roughly 24 months in, I think.
Wow, that's really fast, man. That's really fast. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let's keep going forward. So like with you, like, let's talk about RevOps, because most people don't know what revenue operations is. And, I don't want to say most people don't know, but it's not as common or mainstream as you would think. I clearly know what it is. I've been embedded in the sales world for a while, just like you. So how would you define it is step one. And then step two is like, what's the single biggest problem you see in revenue operations today? Yeah.
I mean, look, it's still emerging, and a lot of people are confused by what it actually is. And I'm going to quote a CFO that I spoke to recently that is actually labeling RevOps BizOps in their org, but it's the stitching together of everything that touches revenue into one organization so that everyone's got the same roadmap and the right prioritization and the right analysis of what's going on from leads to billings. Getting that under control in any company is critical. And so if the people giving you lead numbers are giving you one set of numbers and that doesn't match into what's going on in, let's say your sales and in your finance, et cetera. It all rolls together, right? And getting that your leads to billings not just understood but also accurate and trusted across the organization is the thing that RevOps should be mostly focused on, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And the underlying need to do that are two things. One is data and data congruency and data truth and data accuracy across all the different systems. And the second thing is it's automation of that information, whether it's workflow or data transformations or whatever they may be. And then there's a third one. The last piece would be visualization of that data being easier and more complete across the organization. So all of those things are, I think, are what RevOps is trying to get done. There's some confusion as to how much do I let my RevOps person control certain things, and can they go have all those people reporting into one head that does this? But I don't know if you know Rosalind St. Helena, but Neo4j has just recently, they just recently went down this road, and their president there had the foresight to say, like, no, I'm going to fix this, and hired Rosalind as a vice president of RevOps and is molding in all those areas that we talked about under her organization. So it's still early days to see if this works, but obviously what I hear from her is that one of the biggest things that hampers growth in companies is predictability in their growth. Do you know the gazintas and gazadas of your growth engine? If you don't, then, and they're not accurate, then you don't know how to feed that engine what you need in order to get to the next side, right? To the next stage. And that predictability can only happen through accuracy and shared truth. And that shared truth does not mean single source of truth. It just means when I look in my system, I see the same truth that you see in your systems. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that ability to distribute a 360 view of your customer or your customer data or your whatever it happens to be is the thing that we bring to the table for people.
So Nick, what's the nirvana that, like, once clients use your solution where they're like, oh my God, this is amazing because blank, blank, blank. What is that? Like, what's that euphoric experience they have? Because I could imagine, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
There's many of them. You can go to our website and see customer stories on what it is for different people. The nirvana for something like this comes primarily because, look, I mean, we came from a world where we had a bunch of integrated systems, Oracle Financials, et cetera, and so forth. And we distributed that out into their individual silos, CRM, marketing automation, support, et cetera. But now they're operating independently, and every one of those vendors thinks they're the source of truth for their data, which they are. The point is, how do you get all these different sources of truths to create a full source of truth across these systems and make it accurate? Because, you can integrate systems and with these copy paste point to point integrations, and you have a failure, you're going to have discrepancy between the two different systems. Whereas with something like a transactional engine like Syncari, you're guaranteed that the data is the same in multiple endpoints. I mean, we have a patent pending for this multidirectional sync engine that we invented that does this. And that ability to have those kinds of aha moments is going to vary depending on what is the stack that you have that runs your business. We all make decisions for the right reasons of which CRM, which market automation system, which support system, which success system, which financial system we're going to use. And inherently, by doing that selection, each one of those selections has a different set of problems that you are going to run into. So how do you solve lead routing between HubSpot and Salesforce, let's say, or how do you solve lead routing between Fresh Sales and Marketo, or whatever you happen to be in your stack? Those aha moments are going to be different depending on the stack that you're employing. The point is that getting to foundational, accurate, consistent, and truthful data across your organization is the foundation for everyone.
Oh, so I would have been your perfect customer. So when I was VP of Enterprise, we were in a massive growth. We grew organically, and then we were growing through private equity and acquisitions. And one of the things that was the single most frustrating point across dozens of people was how none of the data lined up.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could talk billing, you could talk ticketing,
Yeah.
you could talk just CRM reporting, like nothing lined up, and it
Cash,
sucked.
etc. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it sucks so bad because like you're like, well, what's the answer? Well, we don't have that answer, and I'm like, this is like these are core numbers that we need to know. Like, well, we don't have that data, and then you'd have to like you're saying, copy and paste, like Excel spreadsheet here, pivot table this, do all this, and it was like a science experiment every time you wanted to get the data you needed to make intelligent decisions about your business.
Yeah.
And that was one business unit, Nick.
One of the ways people describe Syncari sometimes is like if you were to take a giant Excel spreadsheet and you were to put it on top of all your systems data and be able to make that work in real time, that's exactly what Syncari is, right? And so people can do aggregations, meaning like, hey, I want to have a field in my account object called value of customer by summing all the closed won opportunities for that particular account and storing it as a value. That metric alone, creating that and then being able to share that across all the organizations or all the other systems is the kinds of things that Syncari enables that hasn't been easy to do before. I mean, if you think about what state of the art is, it's like, okay, I'm going to ETL all this data over to this data warehouse. Great, got it there. I'm going to do all this crazy massaging of this data. So now this data doesn't match what was in my systems to begin with. And now I'm going to run some reverse ETL operation and try and get that data back out of this data warehouse, back into the systems, and hopefully it gets there, and then hopefully it gets to all of them the same way. I mean, this is the current state of the art that we're trying to disrupt with the product that we're building.
Love that, man. So much value in that. So like, as we kind of go forward, where do you see the future of tech going over the next few years?
Yeah, this is a great question. I talked to a few CEOs about this, and I try to spend time trying to figure this out myself. But what I see clearly is IT, quote unquote IT, is been reducing in responsibility, size, and budget a lot over the last few years. And what that means is it's opened up this opportunity for no code enablement of business users that are becoming super smart. I mean, what we've done is taken all the analysts that used to be in IT and put them into the business units. And now these analysts go like, yeah, I'm not a huge coder, but I really know what I want to do with my process or data, et cetera, my transformations. I want to do these summations, aggregations, whatever I want to do. I know what those are, but I want that to exist everywhere. And so I'm seeing that no code could become very prevalent in the next 3 to 5 years, where if you're still a coded platform, you might be appealing to an engineering team that's embedding something in their own product, but to operate the business, it's probably not going to be very compelling for those users, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard that before. So I love the perspective of that, because that's definitely unique. So you can envision, so like how do you envision that affecting SaaS companies then?
Yeah, I mean, RevOps is emerging because business users are trying to get something complex done across from leads to billings. That's what's going on. And so how do you enable those types of folks to be in control of their destiny and understand how that all works and being able to keep it documented, so if anybody comes in and out of the organization, they can see something and know this is how our processes work. This is a thing that we're going after right now.
Excellent. Love that, man. All right. Well, we're just about out of time, so we're going to go through a quick fast fire. So I'm going to fire 4 quick questions at you. Super easy. What's your favorite book in the last 2 years?
Oh, God, it's right. Believe it or not, I'm reading this right here right now, which is it's from a person that I met recently, but it's called Gap Selling. And I don't know if you've read this book. Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. And if you're a tech CEO and you're not really, a huge salesperson, there's some great information in there for everyone to learn about value creation in the sales cycle and things like that.
Excellent. What's your favorite podcast?
Yours.
Love that. All right. Who's like your favorite founder or CEO that you follow?
Yeah, follow or used to follow. Uh, I admire Phil Fernandez for what he was able to do at Marketo, and folks like him that are insanely tenacious. I mean, Mark is betting off at Salesforce is also someone that's obviously super great. He had a lot of help there at the end, but yeah, I mean, if I had to answer one, I'd say Phil because he was for me. I learned so much from just watching him operate.
And what is he doing now? Is he still over
I
there
think he
or
just sits on boards and flies in his airplane and
lives in
goes,
the good
goes
life,
from house to house and
flying around, going to board meetings?
yeah, flying
Awesome.
around, going to board meetings and visiting his homes whenever he can.
All right, Nick. Last but not least, what's your favorite online tool that you use besides Syncari?
Online tool, my favorite.
Yeah, yeah. What's your favorite? You can't live without. Something you use on a
That would have to be
day-to-day.
Gmail at this point.
That makes sense, man. Well,
I got to tell you though, I'll change that because I spend more time in Slack now than anything else. So I'd have to
really,
say
okay.
Slack and Gmail. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for the time today, man. It was awesome. So, can you let everyone know where they could find you, where they could find out more about Syncari, and then we'll wrap the show.
Visit Syncari.com for information on Syncari. I encourage you to go look at the blog post there because we have a lot of content for RevOps folks that are trying to break into this or trying to understand it. You can see me on LinkedIn. It's Nick Bonfiglio on LinkedIn, and I'm always available to answer any questions or to help out in any way.
Yeah, and I would second that. Like Nick drops some fire on LinkedIn. He'll get super detailed, and then he's also very generous with his time as well. So thanks for being on the show, Nick. It was awesome having you on. Loved your perspective, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate the time.